Sith. An interesting villain is as crucial for a good story as the main character, perhaps even more so. In the numbered episodes, as in most stories of the Star Wars, the places of the main antagonists were occupied by the malevolent antipodes of the Jedi, Sith. Each trilogy presented us with a pair of new villains. The original trilogy had the impenetrable Vader and the dark sorcerer Palpatine. In the prequels, we were introduced to the killing machine Maul and the elegant Count Dooku. And in the sequel trilogy, here the filmmakers decided to go against tradition. We saw Supreme Leader Snoke and the Knights of Ren, but despite their resemblance to the Sith, they were not Sith. We were explicitly told this at the time of the release of The Force Awakens. The Sith are finished. Now we have new villains. But because the main plot points were not written out before the creation of the trilogy, this idea was ultimately abandoned, and in the 9th episode, Palpatine made a return. As a result, on one hand, we did not get fully realized new antagonists, and on the other, we did not see new members of the Sith Order. The only new Sith in the entire trilogy could be considered, in fact, Kylo Ren. By killing Snoke, he proved his right to Snoke to become an acolyte, that is, to receive the lowest rank in the Order. This is mentioned in the novelization of the 9th episode and in the guide, The Secrets of the Sith. Despite this, due to the publicly taken course before the release of The Force Awakens and the minimal presence of the Sith in the sequels, it is generally accepted that there are few or no new Sith in the new canon. The purpose of this video is to show that in fact in the canon during its short existence, a sufficient number of the Sith, beloved by us, opponents of the Jedi, have accumulated. And although there are not as many as in the legends, and the biographies of some negative characters are short, the new canon still gave us a range of interesting stories that an average viewer of the films and series about the Star Wars could easily miss. However, before we start, a small clarification. Some of the Sith names in the canon were inherited from the legends. One cannot equate the biographies of these characters. Yes, often elements of the biography are borrowed from the legends along with the name, but almost always there are significant differences between the canonical and legendary versions of the personality, and sometimes names mean nothing at all, at least for now. I also want to note that the vast majority of Sith do not even have official images. This video will not discuss Sith from the big screen such as Sidious, Vader, Maul, and Tyrannus. This video is only about the Sith, whom you could not see in the movies. First, a historical reference we cannot manage without it. And although in general terms the history is similar to the legendary one, there are a number of differences. Let's start at the very beginning with the origin of the Sith Order. One of its followers of the Jedi Order suddenly decided to diligently study the dark side of the Force. But the others extremely disliked this, and they decided to exile him. Well, while the Council was making its decision, the future Sith managed to recruit several followers into his sect, with whom he then went into exile. The Dark Jedi arrived on Moraband, also known as Korriban. The century-long darkness occurred, during which the sect of the Dark Jedi fully took shape into the Sith Order, and a series of wars and conflicts began between the former brothers in the Force. This era is interesting, although it is poorly detailed. The Sith were engaged in creating terrifying monsters and space stations. You might have heard in the unfinished episode of The Clone Wars, titled The Big Bang, that in ancient times the Sith were involved in creating weapons based on cyber crystals. They also developed mobile battle stations, precursors to the Death Star. Well, eventually, somewhere around 1,000 years before the events of The Phantom Menace, the Jedi likely managed to destroy the Sith. However, in reality, one of them survived. Yes, just like in the legends, it was Darth Bane. He created the Rule of Two and initiated a new dynasty for the Sith. For a millennium, the Order hid in the shadows until the most outstanding Sith, Darth Sidious, exacted centuries-old vengeance upon the Jedi Order. And then he was defeated by Rey. Now let's move on to the actual list. The first Sith was the unknown Dark Jedi from whom the Sith Order began. There are no significant data about his personality, except that he lived several thousand years before the Battle of Yavin, and was likely a male. Well, let's hope that someday we will be told more about the history of this guy, but for now, let's move on to the next one on the list. For thousands of years, the Sith and Jedi tried to destroy each other. By the end of the open phase of this confrontation, a man was born who was destined to forever change the Sith Order, leading it into the shadows so that it could be reborn into something new and powerful. Of course, I'm talking about Darth Bane. During his lifetime, there were two opposing sides, the Brotherhood of Darkness and the Army of Light. If you have read the Darth Bane trilogy or the Jedi vs. Sith comics from the old canon, you are already familiar with these names. Unfortunately, there is little data on what these organizations actually were. We don't even know if the leader of the Brotherhood of Darkness, Lord Skira Khan, existed in the canon. The only mention of him is in the 16th episode of the second season of The Clone Wars. His name appears on the data screen there, but it should be noted that it uses chronology from the Battle of Yavin, although in the Star Wars themselves, such a point of reference is not used. Also, the Battle of Yavin was still over 20 years away at the time the screen was shown. The same applies to other personalities related to the organizations. The maximum you can find are questionable indirect proofs. For example, in the legends, Darth Bane stole the cruiser Valsin from the head of the Sith Academy on Korriban, Lord Cordis. In the new canon, Bane also has a ship with that name, but there is no backstory related to the names of other Sith. All we have is a brief mention in the 44th issue of De Agostini's Build the Millennium Falcon magazine, which in one sentence states that the Valsin belonged to several Sith at different times, among whom was Darth Bane. This is in line with what I mentioned at the very beginning. Often the names and titles taken from the old canon mean nothing. Well, back to Bane. During his life, the millennia-long period of wars between Jedi and Sith came to an end. Though the Sith were not outmatched in numbers compared to the Jedi, the traditional villainous tropes played their part. The more united Jedi were able to exterminate the Sith, who, besides wanting to destroy the Lightsiders, were also obsessed with internecine conflicts. The final battle of the Brotherhood of Darkness and the Army of Light took place on the planet Ruusan as in the old canon. After the Sith were destroyed, Bane created a new order. Its foundation lay in the Rule of Two, inspired by the concept of a Force dyad. It was believed that a Force dyad united two sides and literally made them one whole in the Force, which provided its own benefits. Those possessing such a force could communicate directly with each other regardless of distance, feel each other's emotions, and their Force abilities became stronger. The Rule of Two, the essence of which was that all the power of the dark side of the Force should be divided between two Sith, a master and an apprentice, was created to replace a Force dyad. However, this replacement was but a pale shadow of the dyad. Many Sith, including Bane, tried to artificially create a dyad, but none of the attempts were successful. In addition to the Rule of Two, Bane, as in the legends, was responsible for the Great Sith Plan. This plan was realized millennia later by his follower Darth Sidious. The Sith returned to power over the galaxy and the Jedi Order fell. As for the legends, in them, Bane himself destroyed the Sith with the help of a thought bomb, an ancient Sith spell. He realized that a large number of members weakened the Order, and so that the Sith would not continually exterminate each other for power, there needed to be only two, a master and an apprentice. Darth Bane laid the foundations of the new Sith Order, creating a philosophy based on the Rule of Two, and was also the author of the Grand Plan. When the time came, Bane found himself an apprentice, and his, as in the canon, was named Darth Zana. There is no information about Zana in the new canon, so it is unknown whether this was a human girl as in the legends or not. The only fact, aside from the name, is that the apprentice defeated Darth Bane in a duel on the planet Ambria, which also agrees with the legends. After his death, Bane's remains were placed in a sarcophagus in the Valley of the Dark Lords on Moraband. Interestingly, Darth Bane could have appeared in the canon as early as the 3rd season of The Clone Wars. In the excised fragment, he, along with Darth Revan, appeared before the sun in the form of the Force Ghost. Nevertheless, in the end, Lucas abandoned this idea as it contradicted his own vision of the Force. George believed that Sith, unlike Jedi, could not return after death as ghosts. the image of Darth Bane is very similar to what we have seen in the legends. The face, as in older illustrations, and the Sith himself is clad in Orbalisk armor. But Darth Bane truly appeared in the final episode of the 6th season of the Clone Wars titled Sacrifice. In it, Master Yoda, traveling through the deserted Moraband, encounters an illusion of Bane. The vision no longer resembles its version from the legends. A new design was created for him. The Sith armor covers Bane's entire body, and his head is enclosed in a helmet so we cannot see his face. Besides the armor and the red-bladed lightsaber, it was supposed that Bane also wielded another weapon, the lightsaber pike. Though this weapon does not appear in the episode itself, it is present in illustrations and is mentioned in reference literature. Well, let's hope that in the future we will see some works about Darth Bane, considering how important his figure is for the Star Wars universe. And now let's move on to those Dark Lords after whom the legions of the Sith Eternal from The Rise of Skywalker were named. The names for the legions were given in the visual dictionary for the 9th episode, so I will not mention this point further. And the first among them is Revan. The importance of Revan for the legends is hard to overestimate. He is a key figure of the era of the Old Republic. Additionally, he was the one who laid the foundations of the Rule of Two, which was later adopted by Darth Bane in creating his Sith Order. However, in the canon, the only mention of Revan is that the 3rd Legion of the Sith Eternal was named in his honor. Another appearance of the Sith could have occurred in the 3rd season of the Clone Wars, but I already mentioned this earlier. Andedu. In the canon, there are extremely few mentions of this very important Sith for the legends. In fact, he is only mentioned in 2 sources. In the 2nd issue of the comic Star Wars Adventures Return to Vader's Castle, Vader's servant named Vanni mentions some fire Andedu. The second time Andedu was mentioned was in the 9th episode's visual guide, where it was mentioned that the 5th Legion of the Sith Eternal was named after this Dark Lord. For the legends, however, Andedu is an important character. He was the first Sith to take the title Darth, and also the one who came closest to achieving immortality. Andedu was born thousands of years before the Battle of Yavin, and over his long life, he unraveled many secrets of the Force. However, the more he learned, the stronger his paranoia grew. He constantly felt that everyone around him was plotting against him, and when his apprentices indeed decided to kill him, Andedu already had an escape plan ready. He created a false tomb and fled to the planet Prakith, where he ruled the local people for hundreds of years. In the end, paranoia got the best of Andedu, and he decided to entomb himself in a sarcophagus to ensure that his knowledge would not fall into others' hands. Most of his knowledge, including the secret of soul transmigration, he placed in a holocron that was discovered by Darth Bane 1,000 years before the events of the films. However, the holocron did not stay long with him. A cunning dark Jedi named Set Hearth stole the artifact. He used the knowledge from the holocron to live for centuries at his leisure, transferring into the bodies of his own clones. The holocron emerged again during the era of the Clone Wars and was briefly owned by Count Dooku. In the year 137, after the Battle of Yavin, the leader of the new Sith Order, Darth Krayt, became interested in Andedu's secrets. The Vondun Scare Kirik, which the Yuuzhan Vong had forcibly implanted into Krayt, was slowly consuming him, causing the Sith great distress. He sought salvation from his grim fate, which could be offered by the secret of Darth Andedu's immortality. Krayt tasked his advisor, Darth Weirlock III, with studying Andedu's holocron. After hours spent with the holocron's guardian, Weirlock traveled to Prakith. In a fortress on Prakith, Weirlock found distant descendants of Andedu's servants as well as books and scrolls of the ancient Sith. One of the cultists, named Gurlun, stole the holocron from him and placed it on Andedu's body, resulting in his resurrection. The Sith, resurrected after many centuries, was unwilling to share the secret of immortality with Weirlock. During a brief duel, Krayt's envoy permanently killed Andedu. However, the crafty Sith managed to take the secret of immortality with him. Weirlock found nothing of what he sought in the books and scrolls. Darth Tanis is an ancient Sith Lord, after whom the 17th Legion of the Sith Eternal is named. The aftermath of the great battle on Malachor was shown in the second season of Rebels. An enormous number of Sith and Jedi turned to stone, their horrific deaths caused by a superweapon developed by the Sith. It was Darth Tanis who created this superweapon. This is all that is canonical. However, there is some confusion related to an interview Dave Filoni gave to IGN. In it, he said that the voice of the entity that appeared in the final episode of the second season of Rebels belonged to a Sith woman. It was this woman who built the temple on Malachor, created the superweapon, and commanded Sith forces during the slaughter on Malachor. There is still no official confirmation that this Sith lady, entity, and Darth Tanis are the same character. Darth Tenebrous is the Sith Lord after whom the 26th Legion of the Sith Eternal is named. He was the teacher of Darth Plagueis, who in turn became the teacher of Darth Sidious. Again, in the new canon there is almost no information about Tenebrous. We only know that he was rumored to be the creator of the scimitar, known to us as Darth Maul's personal ship. This inclination towards shipbuilding links Tenebrous with his counterpart from the legends known through the story, the Tenebrous Way. Darth Phobos, after whom the 39th Legion of the Sith Eternal is named. In the new canon, we know nothing except the name. In the legends, it is a rather interesting character. Born on Korriban several millennia before the Clone Wars, the Lady Sith caused significant trouble for both Jedi and Sith. To eliminate her, the two orders even temporarily united, which, as you understand, happened very rarely. And all because of the terrible cunning and special abilities that this woman possessed. She excelled at deceiving and controlling the minds of other beings, creating illusions that her opponents could not distinguish from reality. Phobos created a cult whose members recruited new adherents and eliminated important representatives of the Jedi and Sith orders. In the end, Phobos was destroyed by the combined forces of the two orders, but her fame lived on for many centuries. The Jedi used the image of the Lady Sith in their testing programs. The Phobos simulation was intended to help Padawans overcome their own fears. It is in the form of a simulation that Phobos appears in the game Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. There are two versions of the game's storyline. In one of them, there is a mission in the Jedi Temple, where the simulation of Darth Phobos is encountered. She tries to defeat the main character, Starkiller, using the illusions she creates, and even takes on the appearance of Juno Eclipse, the protagonist's love interest. Darth Desolus, the 44th Legion of the Sith Eternal, is named in his honor. The situation is the same as with Phobos. We know nothing except the name, and in the legends, this character again appeared in the version of the Force Unleashed for older consoles. Of the 6 known Dark Lords used to name the legions of the Sith Eternal, 2 are characters taken from the Force Unleashed for the previous generation of consoles. Apparently, someone from the story team really likes this version of the game. In the legends, Desolus is a male Pauan who lived 3,500 years before the events of the films. Initially, he was a Jedi, and even rose to the rank of Master. However, as often happens, he became fascinated with the forbidden knowledge of the Sith and was expelled from the Order. For such audacity, he decided to take revenge on his former friends. Desolus gathered an army of his fellow Pauans, trained them with special skills to eliminate Jedi, and provided them with shields made of cortosis. As you understand, these shields were used to counter the blows of lightsabers, as cortosis has a unique property. It disrupts the functionality of the lightsabers. The interaction of blades with cortosis weakens the operation of lightsabers, and in some cases even deactivates them. Desolus and his army set up a series of ambushes on Jedi throughout the galaxy, destroying about 2,000 members of the Order. Eventually, Desolus was lured into a trap on the planet Yaga Minor, and the Sith and his army were destroyed by a large Jedi fleet emerging from hyperspace. Like the image of Phobos, the simulation of Darth Desolus was included in the Jedi training program in the temple on Coruscant, and Starkiller also encountered it during one of his forays into the temple. As you have noticed, in the canon there are Sith, the only information about whom are their names. And yet they're still somewhat fortunate. At least they have backgrounds in the form of legendary biographies. The Sith from this part of the video were less fortunate. Darth Sakya is a fictional Sith from the audiobook Dooku, Jedi Lost. Yes, just a made-up character within the universe created by Jedi Master Lena Kastana to test Dooku. Darth Saberus is a Sith lady who froze herself in carbonite and later killed the archaeologist who freed her. An unknown Sith, Carnelian IV, appeared as a hologram in the comic Obi-Wan and Anakin. Darth Quellis was a Sith Lord, a man who served in one of the ancient Sith empires. He was sent to conquer the planet Aloth, inhabited by Twi'lek colonists. However, Quellis sustained severe burns and left the planet. Besides these characters, there are several unnamed Sith who appear in comics as illusions, memories, or visions. Now let's turn our attention to the Sith whose statues are located in the Citadel on Exegol. Here we know 5 names. As you might guess, for most of them, we know only the names Lokfei, Mindran, Sisiri, Nagasado, and Felkor. The children's novelization, The Rise of Skywalker, is the only source where these names are mentioned. In the book, there is a passage where Kylo Ren, having entered the Citadel on Exegol, recognizes the stone depictions of ancient Sith Lords and lists them by name. From this group, the name Naga Sadow stands out. This guy is one of the most important Sith legends. He could use the Force to create powerful explosions on the surfaces of stars and construct enormously detailed illusions indistinguishable from reality, even vast distances away from himself. Yes, Luke from Episode 8 was not the first in this matter. The Sith of Sadow's era lived in isolation. Their territories and the Republic's territories were not connected by known hyperspace routes. But when such a route was found, and the Sith learned the location of the Republic's capital, Naga Sadow, along with his army, nearly captured Coruscant without much preparation. That's how formidable this guy was. If his character interests you, be sure to check out the comic series Star Wars Tales of the Jedi. There, this Sith appears in several issues. Interestingly, in the canon, there is the Keldroma epic. These are tales of mythical characters of antiquity who used the Force like Exar Kun, Naga Sadow, and Keldroma. Essentially, it is a legend, a literary work within the canon, based on a series of legendary comics, Tales of the Jedi. By the way, there's one detail about Sadow from this epic. It mentions that Naga Sadow was responsible for the explosion of the Kron cluster stars, which caused a major cataclysm on the planet Ossus, owned by the Jedi. In the legends, it was another Sith, Exar Kun, who was responsible for the explosion. And now let's talk about Exar Kun, another Sith mentioned in the Keldroma epic. Despite the fact that the events of the epic are not corroborated by canonical sources, the mere existence of Exar Kun, like that of Naga Sadow, is not questioned. It is known that the crime lord Dryden Vos owned a writing desk that included a slab stolen from a Sith temple. This slab bore the inscription, "Our temple praises the Sith Lord Exar Kun." Furthermore, Darth Sidious provided his apprentice Maul with designs for a double-bladed lightsaber, out of respect for the ancient Sith Lord who created a similar design. Darth Atreus, another Sith from ancient times who, fortunately apart from his name, left behind a pair of lightsabers. These lightsabers, even centuries after the death of their owner, possessed a strong aura of the dark side, awakening rage and a desire to kill in whoever wielded them. According to rumors, the most powerful Sith could imbue objects with their dark energy. And most likely, this is what happened with Atreus's sabers, indicating him as an extremely powerful follower of the dark side. The lightsabers were eventually found by Sana Staros. The lightsabers were soon destroyed during a confrontation between Vader and his son after being discovered. Darth Krall, this character was previously named Radaki and was a Jedi Order master. Due to his beliefs, he left the Order, becoming one of the Lost 20. Krall believed that the Jedi should not forsake material goods and saw nothing wrong with Jedi having ties to their families. Eventually he fell to the dark side and took the name Krall. He participated in an event called the Battle of Wasted Years, during which he achieved victory. Against whom and for what reason he fought, the sources remain silent. His lightsaber was stored in the archive of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Crawl was first mentioned in the novel Dooku, Jedi Lost, and visually appeared in the High Republic-era comic series. And no, this is not a canon error. Here he appears as a vision sent by the Drengir, predatory sentient plants. Darth Kristov. It is impossible to say for certain whether this Sith Lord actually existed or was merely a fictional character within the universe. He is mentioned in the 12th issue of the canonical comic series Star Wars Adventures. In it, Anakin and Padme were taking a brief vacation on the ship of the famous actress Risha Sinata. There they witnessed a play whose plot narrated the love story of a woman from the Jedi Order and a Sith. The woman was in love with the Sith, but in the end they dueled, during which the Jedi killed her beloved. Darth Momin, and of course the list of Sith would be incomplete without the absolutely deranged sadist and psychopath Momin. Living before the establishment of the Bane Order, Momin exhibited particular tendencies from childhood. He was fascinated by sculpture and architecture, though he understood them in his own way. For example, he created sculptures from the body parts of animals. Eventually, he ended up in prison. Rumors of an extraordinary young man spread across the galaxy, and one day he was rescued from captivity by a Sith lady named Shah. Sometime later, Momin created a mask that he cherished and wore almost without taking it off. And as is often the case with the Sith, he killed his mentor, a lightsaber. Following the classic Sith path, Momin eventually decided to create his own superweapon, capable of destroying an entire city. The mad architect's plan was to perform a special ritual at the moment of the weapon's activation, plunging the city into something akin to stasis to eternally capture the terror on the inhabitants' faces. However, at the crucial moment, the Sith's plans were thwarted by the Jedi, who boarded his ship. Momin momentarily lost concentration during the ritual, and the monstrous force he unleashed incinerated his body. All that remained of the deranged Momin was his mask. After his death, his teachings were hidden not only by the Jedi, but also by the Sith. Even they believed Momin had gone too far. The story doesn't end there. Centuries later, Darth Sidious handed Momin's mask to Vader. According to Palpatine, the mask was supposed to guide his apprentice in his endeavors. At that time, Vader was heading to Mustafar to build a fortress for himself. The mask turned out to be quite extraordinary. It housed the spirit of the deceased Sith. The spirit forced one of the officers to put on the mask. Thus, Momin acquired a new body after centuries of confinement. Eventually, Vader and Momin began to collaborate. The ancient Sith promised to build a fortress for Vader at a special location where there was the dark side of the Force. A properly constructed castle was supposed to open a portal through which Vader could bring Padme back to life. Yes, it is the same castle from Rogue One. However, Momin's true goal was, of course, different. Using the portal, he wanted to restore his long-destroyed body and fully resurrect. Waiting for the right moment, Momin managed to reclaim his body, but he did not last long in it. An enraged Vader, realizing the deception, destroyed the ancient Sith, and the mask was returned to his master. You can learn about these events from the comic book series Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith by Charles Soule. But that's not all. Now we will talk about the events described in the comic Star Wars Lando. In it, Lando Calrissian and his team decide to rob the Imperialis, which belonged to Sidious. After dealing with the guards, the team discovers that there are no treasures on board, but Sith artifacts are stored in the vault. And, as you might guess, one of these artifacts was Momin's mask. The mask mentally enslaved two team members, the clones, Alexin and Pavel, who were in a relationship and had gone on the mission to earn credits to create another clone they wanted to make their son. In the end, Lando and part of the team managed to escape, and the Imperialis, along with the artifacts, was destroyed, this time finally concluding the story of Momin, Darth Noctis and Darth Sanguis. This is an extremely interesting pair. Darth Noctis was a female Dark Lord of the Sith who sought the secret of immortality, and her quest led her to Exegol. There she encountered a disfigured creature, which she made her servant. Noctis found on Exegol the laboratory of the ancient Sith, Darth Sanguis, which contained records of a ritual capable of making its performer immortal. During the ritual, a sacrifice was required, and Noctis, without hesitation, used her new servant for this purpose. However, when the ritual was completed, Noctis realized that she had been cunningly deceived. After the death of the disfigured creature, the female Dark Lord of the Sith herself turned into the same kind of monster. It turned out that her servant was Darth Sanguis himself. Long ago, he had performed the ritual and became immortal, transforming into a hideous creature in the process. Centuries of agony in a mutilated body ended only when he could pass the curse onto another Sith. So Noctis remained in a repulsive form, wandering Exegol, her further fate unknown. Nonetheless, Noctis is of interest to us also, because she wielded a lightsaber with a curved blade as her weapon. The story of these two Sith is touched upon in the tale A Life Immortal, from the anthology The Dark Legends. Darth Plagueis is considered one of the greatest Sith in the history of the Order and was the mentor of Darth Sidious. Using a scientific approach to studying the Force, he achieved incredible success. His experiments on the midi-chlorians gave him the ability to create life. Plagueis had ambitious goals, aiming to form a Force dyad with his apprentice Sidious and to uncover the secret of immortality. While he was unsuccessful with the former, he succeeded with the latter. Plagueis discovered a ritual of spirit transference from one body to another, allowing one to live forever. However, it was his arrogance that led to his downfall. When Sidious had learned all the knowledge he desired from his master, including the ritual of transference, he betrayed and killed Plagueis as he slept. Remembering his master's failure, Sidious always had a backup plan. On Exegol, he had a laboratory with ready clones into which he could transfer if his body was suddenly destroyed. When death caught up with him, he transferred into a clone's body, but the ritual was imperfect. Sidious found himself trapped in a decaying vessel. Existence in such a body brought him suffering. The Sith believed this had been orchestrated by Plagueis, alleging that he took part of the secrets with him, thus dooming his apprentice to torment. Darth Rend was a Sith who long ago waged war against the Jedi Order. At one point it was believed that Rend had perished, but he returned after some time and attacked the Jedi with new vigor. This Sith is mentioned in the novel Master and Apprentice. There, the young Qui-Gon Jinn, while studying the holocrons of the Jedi Temple archives, discovers a prophecy that evil will one day disappear and later re-emerge with new strength. Qui-Gon believed the prophecy referred to events of long ago, namely, the story of Darth Rend. Darth Scry was a female Sith Lord, whose voice was heard by the young Count Dooku in a vision. In it, she announced that the Sith had returned to the galaxy and activated a superweapon called the Cauldron, causing a planet to be torn in two. It is not known for certain whether this female Sith ever existed, but her existence is hinted at by the artifact, the Hand of Skria, which was found by Jedi Master Lena Costana and her Padawan Sifo Dyas on Rishi Omin, an ancient Sith king who wore a special mechanical spine. This device helped to maintain a certain level of maneuverability for people with severe injuries. One such device was used by the resurrected Sidious in Episode 9. Exim Panshard, mentioned in the Aftermath trilogy, a Sith who held the title of Viceroy. He wore a mask made of meteorite metal that had a powerful bond with the dark side of the Force. Centuries later, this mask fell into the hands of the leader of the Acolytes of the Beyond, Yupe Tashu. Acolytes of the Beyond, a cult of dark side fanatics who came to prominence during the last year of the Galactic Civil War. Its members were not gifted with the Force, and they worshipped the dark side and the Sith. They collected various artifacts related to the dark side. Among these was Panshard's mask, which Yupe Tashu handed over to Kiza, a Pantaran female, who used it to attack a new Galactic Republic post on Deveron. The mask caused the Pantaran female intense anger, which, unable to control, she killed her beloved. Darth Kaldoth. Unlike many Sith on this list, Darth Kaldoth, besides a name, also has a well-developed canon biography. The exact dates of this Sith's life are unknown, but it is believed he existed long before the events of the original trilogy, in the times before the Sith Order of Darth Bane appeared. During his long life, spanning centuries, Darth Kaldoth amassed a vast number of enemies, and his name brought terror even to the greatest Jedi Knights. The tale of Darth Kaldoth is one of a cunning and ruthless manipulator, always one step ahead of his enemies, driven by a thirst for power and knowledge. After completing his training, Darth Kaldoth brutally dealt with his master in one of the abandoned temples on Moraband, leaving his body to rot at the site of death. He was drawn to artifacts of the past, long-forgotten Sith knowledge, through which he sought unprecedented power. One such artifact was a fragment of a fresco of ancient Force users delivered to the Jedi Temple on Bathoris. Darth Kaldoth attempted to steal the relic by orchestrating an attack on the temple, but he failed. The Sith believed that in the chaos of the battle he could steal the fresco, but a Jedi named Bran Athmorath did not allow him to do so. As a result, Darth Kaldoth had to flee to avoid capture. In his pursuit of new knowledge, Kaldoth once infiltrated the graveyard of the Witches of Dathomir and stole the mummified remains of one of the sisters. Sith desired to uncover the secret of the resurrection ritual of the Night Sisters. This action was not appreciated by the witches, and they decided to take revenge. The Night Sister, named Zeldin, using special rituals, penetrated the mind of Darth Kaldoth. The plan was to secretly manipulate the Sith from afar through this connection, pushing him towards actions that would ultimately lead to his death. The witches gazed into the future, searching for paths leading to the demise of Darth Kaldoth. One of the threads led to Nimbus, a Twi'lek male. This Force-gifted boy was destined to become the apprentice of Darth Kaldoth and eventually kill his master. The witches nudged the Sith towards the idea of seeking an apprentice and pointed him towards the young Twi'lek. For many years, Darth Kaldoth and Nimbus traveled together, growing stronger each year. However, despite Darth Kaldoth's excellent training, which made Rai equal to his master in swordsmanship, the apprentice did not attempt to kill Darth Kaldoth, knowing that his master hid countless Force techniques from him, and that an attack would lead to his own death. Instead, the cunning Nimbus secretly entered his master's quarters when he was absent and studied ancient scrolls and texts. Seemingly, the fate of Darth Kaldoth was sealed, but outsmarting a trickster is a difficult task. In reality, the secret training was orchestrated by the master, and he only provided his apprentice with information that wouldn't interfere with Darth Kaldoth's plans. One day on Moraband, Darth Kaldoth demanded his apprentice to create a statue in his honor at the mountain's peak. By that time, Nimbus had studied a ritual that could turn a target into stone, and he decided to use this ritual to turn his master into a statue. Imagine his amazement when he began to transform into a piece of stone during the process. Darth Kaldoth had altered the spell's text so it would affect the caster. This failure enraged the Night Sisters, and they continued their attempts to kill the Sith. The next path to death led through an ancient totem lying among the ruins of a temple on the moon by Obsidia. Darth Kaldoth loved ancient artifacts, and this item was guarded by a powerful spirit, strong enough to destroy the Sith. However, the witches failed again. The Sith arrived at the temple ruins, but his true target was not the artifact, but the guardian spirit itself, which Darth Kaldoth captured through a ritual. But the witches were not willing to concede. The subsequent prophecy revealed the death of Darth Kaldoth at the blade of Jedi Bran Athmorath. This was the same Jedi who had once defeated Darth Kaldoth. The witches instilled in the Sith a desire to avenge his past humiliation, and he launched a military campaign on Kizan to lure Bran. Eventually, the Sith and Jedi clashed in a fierce duel that lasted several hours, but Darth Kaldoth surprised the witches once more. At one point, he lunged onto Bran's sword, allowing it to pierce his shoulder. Bran lost concentration for a second, which was enough for a decisive strike. Darth Kaldoth decapitated the Jedi, exacting his revenge. This drove the witches to extreme measures. The sisters, through a ritual, infused Zeldin, the very witch who had infiltrated the mind of the Sith, with power so that she could fully take control of the Sith's mind and kill him. For this, Zeldin sacrificed even her physical form. She penetrated deeper and deeper into the Sith's consciousness, and by the time she suspected something was wrong, it was already too late. It turned out that the Sith had known about the witch's presence in his consciousness and her manipulation attempts all along. He imprisoned Zeldin in a gilded cage within his mind, thereby dooming her to eternal torment. The Night Sisters were so shocked by what had happened that they never again dared to cross paths with the Sith, and they hung Zeldin's body in the place from which Darth Kaldoth had once stolen the remains of one of the sisters. What eventually became of Darth Kaldoth? Did he ever atone for his crimes? History remains silent on this matter. It is an atypical story in this regard for Star Wars, and even more so for the new canon, which is perhaps what makes it valuable. Darth Kaldoth is mentioned in the stories Gaze of Stone from the Myths and Fables collection and The Gilded Cage from the Dark Legends collection. These are all the known Sith present in the canon at the moment. As you can see, despite the relatively young age of the new canon, it already has a fairly extensive list of Sith. Of course, many names remain just names. Many characters have prototypes from legends, but despite this, there are also original characters with interesting stories. Moreover, those Sith who are known only by name in the canon, or whose biographies are scant, may be used in the future to create various works. In the near future, the series The Acolyte will be released, which will be dedicated to the Sith and will likely introduce us to new names of Dark Lords and also complement the biographies of existing ones.